Did you know?
Zelda creator Shigeru Miyamoto has, at one time or another, had nightmares about game-breaking bugs in Zelda games. Though Miyamoto may understandably dread glitches in his games, other developers look at them more fondly. When Ocarina of Time was being remade in 3D, several of the game's developers wanted to leave in glitches and oversights from the N64 original. Ocarina of Time 3D's programming director Shun Modia said, "One conflict arose when, as programmers, we wanted to get rid of bugs. But the staff members who had played the old game said bugs were fun. We were like, what? It wouldn't be fun if your friends couldn't say, 'Do you know about this?' So we left them in if they didn't cause any trouble and were beneficial." Although many mistakes went untouched to preserve the spirit of the original game, some harmful bugs were fixed. One example of this is the Deku Nuts upgrade glitch found in the N64 version. If Link enters the forest stage beneath the Lost Woods wearing the Mask of Truth, some Deku Scrubs will upgrade the capacity of his Deku Nuts to 30. However, if the player receives the Poacher's Saw from Fado, the Deku Nuts upgrade becomes unobtainable. The game will set flags when events take place so it can mark and keep track of what the player has done. It's believed the Poacher's Saw sets 2 internal flags when it's collected instead of just 1. The second flag is set at the location for the Deku Nut upgrade, and so the game thinks the player has already obtained the upgrade and it disappears. The game has other internal values that can be manipulated in unintended ways. A technique known as wrong warping is often used in speedruns. It glitches the game, allowing players to reach locations in ways that aren't normally allowed. Ocarina of Time organizes its various scenes and areas on a table of values, and each separate version of a location is assigned a 4-digit value. This value is affected by things like the time of day and whether Link is a child or an adult. For example, if adult Link enters Hyrule Market at night, the game will call on the default value for the town, then add values for Link being an adult and then another for it being nighttime. This would cause the game to load the ruined version of Hyrule Market at night. When the player uses the blue warp after defeating a boss, the warp will trigger a cutscene. The game decides what scene to load by checking the value of the dungeon entrance and then adding a set value to it. If the player leaves the room through a different exit while the warp is active, however, the cutscene offset value will be added to the room the player is entering, and the game will load an entirely different scene. This glitch can be exploited in the Great Deku Tree dungeon with incredible results. If the blue warp in the boss room is active, leaving the boss room will take the player straight to the Ganon's Tower collapse sequence at the end of the game. Wrong warping played a huge part in lowering the game's world record time below 24 minutes, and now it's lower than 18 minutes. Performing this glitch requires a bottle containing fish or bugs. If the player uses the bottle while Link is falling or backflipping, the game will queue up a cutscene for the item Link is holding and set it to play where he lands. If Link then uses another item before landing, the game will try to play a cutscene with that item instead. Items with no associated cutscene, like the sword, make the game revert to the default cutscene, which is playing the ocarina. By cancelling out of the ocarina animation on the correct frame while on the edge of the blue warp, the player can move around with the warp still active. Getting a bottle before fighting Goma is easier said than done. It used to be that speedrunners had to escape Kokiri Forest by clipping past the entrance to Zora's River in the Lost Woods. Then they could get the bottle from the Cuckoo Lady in Kakariko Village. However, a new glitch was discovered in 2015 that allows players to create a bottle within the Great Deku Tree itself. Performing this glitch is tricky. The player must pick up an item they've never used before, like a Deku Nut, during a brief camera change that occurs when they exit a crawl space. And then they need to get hit by an enemy as this plays out. The game will bring up the text describing the item but won't lock Link's movements. Because collecting the item was interrupted, the game hasn't defined and added the item to Link's inventory. This means the value that defines what the item actually is can be manipulated before Link acquires it. One way to change the item's value is by moving in front of an unopened treasure chest. Normal play resumes when Link swims in water, and the game will give Link an item based on whatever value is currently stored. This effectively lets players turn the item into a completely different object. There's a chest in the Deku Tree that contains a map for the dungeon, and walking in front of it changes Deku Nut's value so that Link receives a bottle full of blue potion when he lands in the water. Another long-time staple of Ocarina of Time speedruns is the Infinite Sword glitch, or ISG. ISG. If the player interrupts a crouching stab attack with an A button interaction such as reading a sign or opening a chest, the game will keep the swinging sword's hitbox active. Anything that touches the sword in this state will take instant and repeated damage equal to the last attack Link performed, which is extremely useful against bosses and tough enemies. If Link is knocked back, swings his sword, or does most other things that would normally interrupt an attack in this state, the glitch will end. ISG isn't just used to deal damage though. In a normal attack state, the player is halted at edges and cannot jump or fall off them, and the effect of this carries over to the infinite sword glitch. If the player is hit by a bomb blast while doing a backflip and holding R to shield, they'll float in midair unable to fall. This trick, known as bomb hovering, has its uses in Ocarina of Time, but is hugely useful for sequence breaking in Majora's Mask. Bomb hovering in Majora's Mask can give the player access to places they wouldn't normally be able to reach, such as the areas behind the load zones in Clocktown. These places mostly just contain low-res images of the areas beyond the loading zone, creating the illusion that the world is connected. However, one of these areas at the north end of West Clocktown contains a fully functioning owl statue, which is meant to represent the owl statue in the next area. Activating the statue enables the player to use the Song of Soaring to fast travel around the game world. The statue was never intended to be used though, so it isn't indexed as a warp location. If no other owl statues have been activated, the game will have no active warp points, and the song will warp Link to the default Song of Soaring map cursor position, which is Great Bay. This value can be changed, however. The cursor positions for the pause screen and the Song of Soaring map share the same data. This means the Song of Soaring's default map cursor position can be manipulated by moving the cursor on the pause screen map. The song's menu and the pause menu don't line up, however, so the player won't warp to the area they've selected on the pause menu. This is fairly useful, as usually the player can only warp to locations they've already been to besides Great Bay. If the player makes their way to Goron Village, for example, they can warp straight to the top of Stone Tower. Using a glitch in the Wind Waker, Link can actually swim faster than the King of Red Lions. If the player pulls out the Wind Waker while being forced off a ledge, Link will bring out the Wind Waker while falling. This is known as the Wind Waker dive. If the player cancels out of using the Wind Waker 3 frames before hitting the ground, they'll still be using the Wind Waker when Link lands, but the game will act as though it's in the middle of normal gameplay. If the player brings up the Wind Waker again, the camera will lock in place, but Link will still be able to move around. Hopping into the water and pressing up left or up right on the control stick will cause Link to rapidly rotate until the player lets go of that direction. As soon as they do, Link starts moving backwards with all the momentum built up from each turn. Since the game's programmers didn't plan on Link ever actually swimming backwards, the only limit on how fast he can super swim is his air supply, as it limits how long the player can charge up the swim. This technique can literally shoot Link across the entire game world in seconds, and even move him at such speed that he'll be inside areas before they've even loaded. The Hyrule field shown at the title screen of The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess is actually interactive. If you reset the game as Link is about to drown in quicksand or even fall into a bottomless pit, the code that tells Link to respawn will continue running in the background as the title screen loads. As a result, Link wakes up on the Eldon Bridge with no music playing and no visible UI. Epona can be summoned using the grass here, but you'll have to walk a ways to actually reach her. None of the load zones in the field are present, meaning Link can explore the canyons beyond them and fall out of bounds. Falling in the field will cause the UI to reappear when Link respawns, and dying after this will initiate a glitched version of the fight with King Bulbin on Eldon Bridge. If the player manages to defeat Bulbin, they'll be taken to an even buggier version of Kakariko Village. The village will be stuck in Twilight even though Link is able to run around as a normal human. Link won't have any of his items, however, and opening doors here will cause the game to crash, making it impossible to progress. If we jump back to the part of the glitch where the UI has just reappeared, it's possible to perform a different glitch. When Link originally came into the title screen area, the game loaded up a dummy file used by the real-time cutscene engine for Twilight Princess's intro. When the player saves the game, they're now saving it using this dummy file as a base. When the player reloads the file, Link will start in Farron Spring. This is because the dummy file is using the game's cutscene information to decide how the player starts, and the default cutscene location is in Farron Spring. Link will also have all the flagged equipment in the cutscene dummy file, such as the hero's clothes, the Orden sword, and the Hylian shield. The game will also think Epona has already been tamed, so the player can use her to acquire the iron boots earlier than usual. There's a very similar glitch in The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. This title screen glitch even enables the player to warp around the game world similar to the warping glitches in Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. But to see that, you'll have to click on this annotation to see my video on Skyward Sword glitches. Don't forget to subscribe to DidYouKnowGaming for more facts and trivia, and if you like this video, give it a like. You know what to do.